Call the meeting to order. Are there any substitutions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to take into consideration Bill number 14, an act respecting the Assessment Act? For yea? Against nay? Carried. Minister, would you like to, if you have any opening remarks or anything, or go right to questions? Mr. Kuhn can get that.
I already said my opening comments the last time I was here.
All right. Any questions? Okay. Member from Restigouche West.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et rebonjour à Madame la Ministre et aux membres du personnel. C'est toujours un plaisir de me lever en chambre pour débattre des projets de loi et spécifiquement celui-ci sur la loi sur l'évaluation en cette belle journée nationale de l'habitation. On this National Housing Day, it's nice to talk about assessment. And we're going to try to combine both ideas. As a former municipal administrator, my first question to the minister was, were the municipal association and les urbanistes, est-ce que les urbanistes ont été consultés sur ce projet de loi aussi?
Through the chair to the member opposite, we discussed this with a number of different stakeholders, specifically the cities, no, although we had some conversations with some cities, but not the municipal association.
And the second part of my question, thank you, was about the planning commissions or the planners themselves, their planning association.
No, not specifically.
I hope the minister, thank you, Mr. Chair, I hope the minister realized that when we're talking about building new construction in municipalities or in incorporated areas, it has to go through the municipal bylaws and the planning bylaws, or in the planning process, the building permits, the land delimitations, surveying and everything. So those are key stakeholders in a projecting of building new buildings in a town or a village. And I just find that strange that nobody in your department has consulted with neither of those associations. So my next question then, when was this bill start? When was this first date that it was starting to be planned or to be brought up? Was it thought of maybe 6 months ago, 12 months ago, or only a few weeks ago?
Through the chair to the member opposite, so this look at the housing spectrum and understanding the crisis we're in started with the 90-day rental review. We've been interacting with stakeholders since then to get a better understanding of what some of the barriers are to development. This is an idea brought forward by a stakeholder that we explored. It was a good idea to spur more development. You know, our world has shifted since COVID in New Brunswick, and we have a huge influx of people coming in, and we're not keeping up in development to have enough units to keep the vacancy rate at a level that that we're not in a housing crisis. So this has been an ongoing initiative. This is one of many options that we're exploring to fill gaps within the housing spectrum.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je comprends très bien le point de vue, puis j'espère que ça sera un incitatif, parce que jusqu'à date, nous, on ne le voit pas comme un incitatif. Donc, on veut essayer de contribuer à ça, puis essayer de comprendre le raisonnement derrière ça, pour s'assurer que lorsque ça deviendra une loi, que ça sera facilement mis en place et que, oui, il y aura des avantages de suivre cette loi-là. Et ma question, donc, si ça fait seulement qu'à peu près 90 jours, donc, toute la question de la réforme municipale toute la question de la réforme municipale était déjà enclenchée, les livres blancs, le livre vert étaient déjà produits. Est-ce que la ministre a consulté le ministre de l'Environnement et gouvernements locaux et responsable de la réforme municipale par rapport à ce projet de loi-là? Et si oui, dans quel angle elle a attaqué le questionnement avec le ministre?
To the member opposite, there was some confusion when I said 90 days. It's a 90-day rental review that was done in 2020, I believe. The discussions have been ongoing since then. This isn't just a 90-day-old initiative. And yes, we've been in communications with ELG related to any work we're doing around development and trying to encourage more units being built here in New Brunswick.
Je suis d'accord, Monsieur le Président. Merci, premièrement, pour la réponse et surtout la clarification. Donc, si on a pensé à ce processus-là depuis 2020 et qu'il y a une réforme municipale qui était en pleine expansion ou en plein lancement aussi à cette époque-là, ma question serait la suivante. Est-ce que à l'année 2 ou à l'année 3 de votre initiative ou des rabais, parce qu'il y aurait 33 de rabais et 66 les valeurs seraient à 33 de l'évaluation à cette date-là, puis à 66 Est-ce que la pleine valeur de la construction va tomber dans l'assiette fiscale de la municipalité ou seulement la partie du 33 à rabais, ou est-ce que c'est la pleine valeur de 100 de l'évaluation à cette date-là?
Through the chair to the member opposite, so at January 1st of each year, a property is assessed at its real and true value. It would be assessed at 33% of what the real and true value is for that first year. Same with the second, then it'd be 66% of what's assessed at the real and true value, and then it would be at 100% in the third year.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, je veux clarifier et faire sûr que la ministre nous répond bien. Là, pour les municipalités qui sont à l'écoute, les municipalités vont perdre la première année 67% de l'évaluation d'un bâtiment en pleine construction et la deuxième année 33%. Est-ce que la ministre peut me confirmer ça? Parce que c'est des pertes, ça peut être des pertes majeures pour les municipalités.
Through the chair to the member opposite, I think we need to be clear here that this is potential revenue. These buildings do not exist, these units do not exist. So this is potential future revenue for the municipalities. And I will also say that for 2022 and 2023, the full 100% of the tax base was delivered to the municipalities. And so therefore, the province is picking up that piece.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'espère que la ministre comprend comment ça se passe sur le terrain. Souvent, les municipalités sont impliquées dans les projets de développement avec les entrepreneurs locaux ou régionaux pour bâtir des unités comme celle-là. Et lorsqu'on va leur dire que tu as beau travailler avec l'entrepreneur, je vais donner des chiffres, puis c'est des chiffres bien niaiseux, pour juste qu'on se comprenne, là. Alors, on est en train de construire en 2023, puis l'évaluation va tomber pour 2024 à 100 000 Le promoteur, lui, va seulement payer 33 % de ce 100 000 $-là, ou va juste être taxé sur ce 33 % « et la municipalité va juste avoir 33 %, donc 330 000 au lieu de 1 million d'évaluation foncière. Donc, c'est sûr et certain que ça ramène son assiette fiscale à la baisse l'année 1 de la construction. Et à ce moment-là, je trouve que c'est... Surtout lorsqu'on était en pleine planification d'une réforme municipale, je trouve qu'on a caché des pertes potentielles à des municipalités parce que normalement, ils auraient eu la pleine valeur de la construction et pas seulement que le 33 %. Donc, est-ce qu'on maintient cette directive-là de donner juste le 33 % pour l'année 1 et 66 % pour l'année 2?
Through the chair to the member opposite, I would agree there's a potential for perceived loss going forward for the communities, but I would also argue that the long-term benefit of this and the enhanced housing in each of the communities, this incentive is also for vacant buildings so that they can become new housing stock. So everybody wins if we have more housing stock for renters within New Brunswick. So you are correct with what you are saying, but the long-term benefit is great, especially for communities that have hardly any housing stock in them. We can begin working on some of the existing buildings and get new units in those buildings.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Ministre. Mais entièrement d'accord. Je suis convaincu qu'on va avoir enfin des places à rester pour les gens. C'est ce qu'on vise au bout de la ligne. Sauf que ce que je trouve désolant, c'est le processus pour se rendre jusqu'à là. C'est qu'on n'a pas impliqué les municipalités qui vont être des perdantes financières parce que normalement, eux s'attendent, lorsqu'une maison ou un bloc appartement ou une entreprise se bâtit, ils ont 100% de l'évaluation foncière dans leur assiette fiscale. Et là, on apprend aujourd'hui avec un projet de loi comme celui-ci que pour les 2 premières années après 2023, s'il y a des constructions, ça ne sera pas le cas. Ils vont avoir des pertes sur leur évaluation foncière. Donc, oui, c'est des pertes anticipées, mais c'est quand même, au bout de ligne, une perte. Je pense à mes collègues qui vont devenir maires dans pas longtemps. Ça ne sera pas facile à gérer ces pertes-là ou à essayer de faire du développement lorsqu'on gère des pertes. Donc, je comprends entièrement où ce que la ministre veut en venir, mais je veux juste qu'elle prenne en considération l'impact que ça va avoir sur les municipalités. Et tout le processus d'évaluation ou de toute la planification derrière les urbanistes. Le défi qu'on a dans les régions, puis je vais vous donner l'exemple chez nous, on a des commerces qui ont essayé de faire rezoner leur terrain pour bâtir une garderie. Et la liste d'attente au Restigouche était de 1 an et demi. Si on attend 1 an et demi à faire rezoner le terrain, 1 an de construction, la majorité des entrepreneurs vont abandonner le processus. On sait qu'il y a très, très peu d'urbanistes dans la région. Est-ce que votre ministère a pensé à des solutions pour appuyer les municipalités et les commissions des services régionaux avec toute la question d'urbanisme, c'est-à-dire tout le rezonage des terrains pour accélérer le processus et accélérer le processus de délivrance de permis de construction aussi, qui est très long. Encore là, j'en ai vu des attentes de 6 à 9 mois avant d'avoir la livraison d'un permis de construction. Donc, est-ce que la ministre peut nous garantir qu'il y aura de l'aide additionnelle pour les CSR, pour l'urbaniste, dans les prochains mois?
Member opposite, the responsibility for the planning is with ELG, Environment and Local Government. We certainly will advocate to make things better, but a discussion needs to be had with ELG, not Service New Brunswick.
Je comprends. Je suis juste content que la ministre va solliciter son collègue parce que c'est un enjeu majeur si on veut atteindre l'objectif visé avec le projet de loi. Ça prend les urbanistes et ça prend les municipalités, les CSR, d'impliquer dès le départ. Merci d'avoir compris. L'autre question que j'aurais pour vous, Madame la ministre, c'est toute la question de l'évaluation des bâtiments. Est-ce que c'est basé sur le revenu de location ou uniquement sur la valeur immobilière, sur le coût de la construction? Comment on évalue un immeuble à logement? Est-ce que c'est par le revenu de location ou autre chose?
To the member opposite, so when the building is complete, it is assessed using the income approach. As it's being constructed, it's based on the value of the land and any improvements to that land until it's complete.
Donc, si c'est basé sur le revenu, comment le Service Nouveau-Brunswick va chercher du propriétaire ses revenus? Est-ce que c'est à travers Revenu Canada ou est-ce que c'est à travers un autre moyen pour faire l'évaluation ou est-ce que c'est sur des hypothèses?
Chair, to the member opposite, through Section 8 of the Assessment Act, the Executive Director has the ability to collect information, data from property owners, so they would ask for financial information from the property owners to be used as part of the assessment process.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Ministre. Est-ce qu'on sait qu'il peut? Est-ce qu'il le fait et si oui, à quelle fréquence?
So through the chair of the member opposite, there's kind of 4 different circumstances where we would be requesting this information. When there's new construction, we always ask for this information. If there's sales of a property, if we need to do, we routinely do re-inspections to ensure nothing has been changed with the property. And there can also be a request for a review, and at that point, we would do a reassessment as well. The 4, re-inspection, sales, new construction, request for a review.
Merci. Je n'avais pas pogné le new. OK. C'est juste que c'est bizarre parce que j'essaie de voir, est-ce qu'on fait la même chose avec le secteur commercial? C'est-à-dire, je vais prendre l'exemple, un centre d'achat ou un immeuble avec plusieurs commerces à l'intérieur d'un bâtiment, 2 ou 3 commerces à l'intérieur d'un bâtiment. Est-ce qu'on va aussi baser sur le revenu ou uniquement sur la valeur de la bâtisse dans son ensemble sans considérer les revenus?
The chair to the member opposite. So the type of buildings you're describing sell based on their income potential. So yes, these are all the type of properties that we would collect information that we had discussed before. And I just want to note too that this is a standard practice across Canada for sure, and we know it's happening in places in the States as well. I don't want to say all, but this is the standard method for assessing these types of properties.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais vous dire que j'ai fait 14 ans dans le domaine municipal, puis c'est la première fois que j'entends qu'on évalue sur le revenu. Donc, à chaque fois que j'ai rencontré les employés de Service Nouveau-Brunswick, on ne m'a jamais expliqué ça pour comprendre l'évaluation foncière de la municipalité. Jamais qu'on m'en parlait dans les blocs appartements ou les centres commerciaux qu'on considérait les revenus. J'espère que je n'ai pas mis nos entrepreneurs locaux dans le trouble en espérant que l'année prochaine, tout le monde va se faire réévaluer pour ses revenus, là. Mais c'est juste que, en tout cas, je ne pense pas que c'est la pratique courante de votre ministère de le faire, mais ça, je vais vous laisser, puis je vais me taire sur la question. Maintenant, on va revenir au projet de loi, puis on va essayer de comprendre. Est-ce qu'il y a une obligation pour les promoteurs d'inclure un certain nombre de logements abordables?
Chair to the member opposite, no.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, je vais revenir encore à la façon qu'on essaie de développer des communautés viables, c'est d'avoir des mix de personnes ou des mix d'éléments à l'intérieur d'un quartier ou d'un secteur dans une municipalité. Exemple, dans la majorité des municipalités, lorsqu'on développe des subdivisions, il y a des terrains pour les parcs, il y a des résidences soit pour la GRC, il y a des résidences pour à faible revenu, que soit NB Housing ou quelque chose, on va permettre ça pour faire des mixtes et non pas juste des îles là, isolées. Et donc, ce programme ici, je vois que même si on bâtit un bloc de 100 appartements, il n'y en aura pas une là-dedans dans le logement abordable. Et on sait qu'il y a une crise dans le logement abordable tout de suite aussi. Qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait l'inclure dans la législature pour que ça le soit? Est-ce que ça a été envisagé par votre ministère ou est-ce qu'on néglige totalement ce qu'on appelle le affordable housing? On laisse ça de côté pour uniquement le high-end des loyers?
So through the chair to the member opposite, there are other incentives available for affordable housing. Are there enough or the right ones? That's the question that we're asking right now, that we now have a minister responsible for housing. This particular bill is not the place for that. This particular bill is to encourage new units. That's the fundamental reason for this bill. But there are other incentives we need to look at around affordable housing and other things that we can do to encourage more affordable housing units.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Ministre. Donc, si je comprends bien, il n'y a rien qui empêcherait un promoteur de bénéficier de ce projet de loi ici avec les rabais sur l'évaluation foncière et d'aller voir le développement social et d'avoir de l'aide pour du logement à faible revenu. Est-ce que c'est correct et est-ce que ça serait toujours admissible, les deux programmes?
Through the chair to the member opposite, yes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis un petit peu confus parce qu'habituellement, on peut seulement bénéficier d'un programme gouvernemental par projet. Et donc, dans un projet de logement ou d'immeuble à logement, on pourrait bénéficier de minimum deux programmes gouvernementaux. Est-ce que c'est une pratique courante pour le développement résidentiel ou commercial?
Through the chair to the member opposite, I can't speak to other programs, but the purpose of this bill that we've brought forward is to encourage more development, faster, more units, to get our number of housing units up. If the builder takes advantage of other programs to have more affordable housing units, that's a bonus for all of New Brunswick and a bonus to help us get out of this crisis.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Comme qu'on dirait chez nous, the more the merrier. Je vais aller du côté un petit peu technique cette fois-ci, Madame la Ministre, si vous me le permettez. C'est que, à l'article 15.31.1, on donne la définition de année de base comme étant l'année déterminée par le directeur en vertu du paragraphe 5. Est-ce que la ministre pourrait nous expliquer ce qu'elle veut dire? Parce que là, si je me réfère au paragraphe 5, ça me réfère à d'autres. Donc, est-ce que la ministre peut nous expliquer la définition de année de base, s'il vous plaît?
Through the chair to the member opposite, the base year is the date they received their building permit.
Merci. Donc, ça, c'est beaucoup plus simple à comprendre dans mon jargon à moi. Merci beaucoup pour cette réponse. Donc, à ce moment ici, l'article 15.31.3 stipule qu'il y aura des critères prescrits par règlement. Et j'ai assez d'expérience en comité pour savoir une partie de la réponse de la ministre en me disant, bien, ça sera déterminé plus tard. J'aimerais savoir quel type ou est-ce qu'il y a des pistes de critères qui pourraient être élaborés, que la ministre pourrait nous dévoiler aujourd'hui, parce que lorsqu'on parle sur certains critères, ça serait comme intéressant qu'on sache sur quelle piste on pourrait travailler dessus. Merci.
So through the chair to the member opposite, yes, I can give you an idea of a few types of things that would be in the regulation. To start off, what the application approach would be. So what information would have to be provided by the developer to qualify for this phased-in assessment? Timing around when building permits are acquired and construction starts. You know, creating additional units within a building in order to qualify, percentage of value of the building that is being spent on renovations to qualify to have the phased-in assessment. So it would be specific things like that that would be in the regulation.
Now we're talking, on parle maintenant du directeur partout dans le projet de loi. Premièrement, qui est ce directeur?
Lisa Dion is the executive director who is sitting behind me here counseling me today, which I'm very thankful for.
Est-ce que vous pouvez me répéter le titre exact qu'elle aurait sur sa carte d'affaires? Est-ce que c'est directeur général? Parce que je pensais que c'était M. Allen qui était directeur général. Je ne sais plus.
Through the chair to the member opposite, she is the executive director of our property assessment services. Monsieur Roy is the CEO of Service New Brunswick.
All right. Thank you. So now it's a little bit clearer. Mais cette personne a énormément de pouvoir à l'intérieur de ce projet de loi-là, c'est-à-dire qu'elle va approuver les demandes, elle va déterminer l'année de base, et même qu'à l'article 15, 31, 10, je vais juste le feuilleter, est finale et ne peut être remise en question ni révisée par un tribunal la décision du directeur d'approuver ou de refuser d'approuver une demande. Donc, c'est vraiment non... On ne peut absolument pas s'abstiner avec vous, madame, là, si je comprends bien la question. Il n'y a aucun moyen d'aller devant un tribunal avec une décision d'une personne. Est-ce que je comprends bien le projet de loi?
Through the chair to the member opposite. So the position of the executive director is a statutory officer. And so the authority lies with the statutory officer. Her position is arm's length from government so that we cannot interfere in the assessment process. Now, property owners can still appeal their assessments, and they still have court available to them if the appeal process, they don't get the answer they want from the appeal process. So there are processes available, but the authority at the end of the day, she has statutory authority to keep her from arm's length so that she is not interfered with in her role as assessor for the province of New Brunswick property.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la ministre. Je comprends que le client ou le promoteur peut contester l'évaluation, mais dès le départ, si sa demande a été refusée, il n'y aura pas d'évaluation parce que son projet n'ira pas de l'avant. Moi, je pensais qu'on vivait dans un monde démocratique où est-ce qu'il y avait toujours une question, il y avait toujours un processus de contester une décision, surtout devant un tribunal ou devant un comité. Et celui-ci, dans votre cas, dans ce cas ici, c'est vraiment une personne qui détermine si la demande est bonne, on détermine l'année, puis on détermine les critères, puis après ça, bien, il n'y a pas de question de contester la décision d'une personne. Est-ce que c'est la pratique courante dans d'autres projets de loi? Parce que moi, je me souviens on l'a enlevé de certains projets de loi justement parce qu'on donnait trop de pouvoir à une personne. Est-ce qu'on pourrait considérer une telle démarche?
Through the chair to the member opposite, this methodology is consistent with other benefit programs. And to say the executive director is not analyzing all these individually alone. She has a committee that reviews this, and the committee would review the applications, make a determination on the applications. If there's some non-consensus with members of her committee, then she would ultimately make the decision. The developer always has the court open to them if they don't agree with whatever the final decision is by the executive director. So they do have court available to them.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis d'accord, mais lorsqu'on met dans un projet de loi que toute la décision est finale, puis on ne peut pas amener ça devant un tribunal, donc c'est à l'intérieur du ministère, je trouve que c'est... Si je serais un juge, je dirais, bon, ben, monsieur, ben, vous avez embarqué dans le projet, puis c'était clair et précis que vous ne pouviez pas contester, là. Donc, ça devient un élément dissuasif pour les entrepreneurs lorsqu'ils savent que même lorsqu'ils vont en faire une application, qu'elle peut être rejetée, puis ils n'ont pas de chance de ramener leur évaluation, de critiquer la décision du directeur. Donc, puis je sais, puis vous avez parlé de arm's length du gouvernement, mais donc on ne peut même plus aller voir le ministre pour lui dire, regarde, il y a eu une erreur, un préjudice de fait pour moi, là. J'ai pas pu avoir mon permis ou j'ai pas pu avoir mon approbation de projet. Donc, comment on fait pour aller plus loin que le directeur, autre que les tribunaux?
Member opposite, I'm going to return to this as consistent with the way the other benefit programs are administered. They can always appeal the assessed value of their property. Again, this is consistent with other programs.
All right. Hope you ask for a pay raise also. With this law, your roles and responsibilities are greater. The next round of questions aims about the evaluation and the process of evaluation of this bill in its entirety. Last week, we had discussed numbers, and we were talking that in 2021, there was 135 new constructions for about 2,177 units. In 2022, already there is 45 permits issued for 675 units. Can the minister tell us where those 45 are and what type of, is it mainly in large cities or is it across the province?
Through the chair to the member opposite, these building permits have been all over the province with the concentration in the Moncton region, I would say, and in the bigger cities.
All right. And we had talked last year of un taux d'inoccupation à Moncton de 1,5 versus d'autres régions comme Campbellton à 0,3 Est-ce que c'est exact?
Through the chair, you have the right numbers. I will note that these are data that we get from CMHC, and we should be getting new data and new numbers early in the new year. That's usually when we get them, yes, for this year.
Je pense que je vais y aller avec une dernière question avant de passer à mon collègue, puis je pourrais garder le privilège de revenir, mais c'est toute la question, encore là, vous allez dire que je suis technocrate, là, mais c'est tout dans la définition d'un immeuble résidentiel. Un immeuble résidentiel. Au paragraphe B, on parle « fait ou fera l'objet d'une construction importante », selon la définition que donne ce terme les règlements. Donc, on parle d'une construction importante. Pour moi, importante veut dire quelque chose, puis peut-être pour vous, ça veut dire d'autres choses, et au terme que donnent les règlements. Donc, on base encore cette définition-là sur des règlements. J'aimerais savoir puis en anglais, c'est « undergoing major construction as defined in the regulations ». So, the regulations are not set, and we're talking about major construction. I'm trying to figure out what is a major construction and based on what regulations.
The chair to the member opposite, that was some of the things I was talking about that you would see in regulation. So a major renovation would be a percentage construction project, percentage of assessed value, a certain percentage of assessed value that they spend in construction would be considered a major construction project. I will also note that the regulations, when complete, will be going out for public comment, and we would take all those things into consideration when we finalize the regulations. So it will be out for public comment.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. OK, donc, on parle de construction, mais on veut probablement dire plus rénovation ou réaménagement de l'immeuble et non une construction nouvelle. Parce que pour moi, une construction, c'est on commence from scratch up et versus une rénovation, bien, elle est là, puis on la révise. Non, mais là, je comprends le sens qu'on veut dire. Donc, je vais céder, merci, Madame la ministre, et merci, Monsieur le Président, merci aux employés. Je vais céder la parole à mon collègue, mais je me garde le droit de revenir avec d'autres questions. Merci.
Thank you. Member from Kent North.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour à la ministre et à toute l'équipe. Ma première question, assez simple, je veux juste m'assurer que c'est quoi les dispositifs dans cette loi ici afin d'assurer que cet allègement ici ne sera pas donné à des logements locatifs à court terme, comme des Airbnb ou des VRBO, ou dans ce genre-là, ce style-là.
Through the chair to the member opposite, no.
C'était pas ça ma question. Je n'avais pas demandé oui ou un non. J'avais plutôt demandé, c'est où dans la loi est-ce qu'on assure que ça ne peut pas arriver? Y a-t-il un dispositif? C'est-tu une définition? Qu'est-ce qui va faire en sorte? Est-ce qu'il y a une définition de location à long terme, à court terme? Je veux juste m'assurer qu'il n'y a pas ce qu'on appelle un loophole. Puis je me demande où dans la loi va faire en sorte que ça ne peut pas s'appliquer au Airbnb, au VRBO.
Through the chair to the member opposite, there's nothing specifically in this bill. This would be dealt with through regulation, and we would have the definition of a long-term rental mirror what would be in the Residential Tenancies Act. Is it the Residential Tenancies Act? Okay, thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et donc, vous pouvez nous assurer aujourd'hui qu'il y aura un règlement qui fera en sorte que ça ne s'appliquera pas au logement locatif à court terme?
This legislation is for long-term rentals.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, ma prochaine question, je me demandais si, juste une question de curiosité, parce que j'ai entendu mon chef en parler ce matin, si la Commission du logement du Nouveau-Brunswick va avoir un rôle à jouer, est-ce que ça va être ravivé, est-ce que ça va avoir un rôle à jouer, parce que c'est quand même un projet de loi que vous dites dans la première et la deuxième lecture, que vraiment un objectif d'assurer qu'il y a des logements locatifs à long terme abordables. Et donc, je me demandais juste si la Commission du logement du Nouveau-Brunswick va avoir un rôle à jouer. Parce que je pense qu'elle existe encore sur papier.
Chair, to the member opposite, can you clarify what commission you're talking about? I'm just sorry, I don't.
En anglais, je crois que c'est the Housing Commission. Ouais.
Through the chair to the member opposite, would you mind repeating your question again? We're just a little confused of how to answer because I'm not quite sure what you were asking.
Oui, définitivement. Ma question était simplement, est-ce que le NB Housing Commission aura un rôle à jouer? Parce que vous dites dans le projet de loi que l'objectif, c'est d'augmenter le nombre de logements abordables dans la province. Je me demandais juste si le NB Housing Commission allait avoir un rôle à jouer parce qu'il existe encore sur papier. Excusez, Madame la ministre, peut-être c'est de ma faute, là. C'est NB Housing Corporation. Je ne sais pas si c'est une différence, mais désolé du mauvais nom. Ouais.
Opposite, they don't have a specific role to play in this proposed legislation, but they could possibly benefit from it.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la ministre. À travers du président, bien sûr. Étant donné que c'est la journée, du logement, je me demandais, je vais profiter de l'occasion, j'aimerais savoir ce que vous en pensez, Madame la ministre, étant donné qu'on parle de logement abordable, j'aimerais savoir, est-ce que vous voyez le droit à un logement abordable comme étant un droit de la personne?
Through the chair to the member opposite, this bill is being proposed to create as many housing units as we possibly can in a short amount of time. We've acknowledged we have a housing crisis. We've acknowledged we need to do everything we possibly can to get more units on the market so that there is housing options for all of New Brunswickers. Discussing what specific human rights are associated to different things is not really appropriate when we're talking about a housing bill and an assessment bill. Thank you.
Je vois pas comment ça serait pas approprié, mais merci pour la leçon d'éthique parlementaire de la ministre. Mais on parle de logement. Hein? On parle du logement, que ce soit un droit humain ou non. Ça vient avec une vision de votre département. Je connais déjà votre département, j'ai déjà posé cette question-là. Je le sais qu'ils vous ont probablement demandé de répondre non ou de ne pas répondre, ce que vous avez très bien fait, Madame la ministre. Mais merci pour la leçon. Donc, étant donné que vous avez parlé de logement abordable dans votre première lecture, votre deuxième lecture, votre communiqué de presse aussi, moi j'aimerais amener un amendement. Je pense qu'il ferait juste renforcer votre projet de loi, Madame la ministre. Hein, pas tout projet de loi peut être parfait la première fois, on peut toujours les améliorer. Et donc, j'aurai un amendement, puis je vais le lire, puis vous allez certainement comprendre ce dont cet amendement fera à la loi. Donc, à l'article 2.41, A, ajouter ce qui suit avant le paragraphe 1. Donc, ça deviendrait 2.41, parenthèse 0.1. Dans le présent article, logement locatif abordable s'entend d'un logement locatif pour lequel le loyer est fixé à un montant égal ou inférieur à 30 du revenu brut du ménage du locataire. B, au paragraphe 3, 1, dans la version anglaise, biffé « and » après l'alinéa C. 2, ajouter ce qui suit après l'alinéa C. C.1, il certifie que, au terme de la construction, un pourcentage des logements locatifs dans l'immeuble résidentiel à logements multiples seront désignés logements locatifs abordables, lequel pourcentage ne peut être inférieur au pourcentage minimal fixé par la ministre de Services Nouveau-Brunswick. Donc, voici mon amendement. Ça ferait juste en sorte qu'on, dans le fond, on assure à travers de cette loi ici qu'on s'attaque réellement au logement abordable.
Through the chair, the member opposite, thank you. And I request a recess so we can consider this.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. Now we'll call the meeting back to order. It's been moved by the member from Kent North that Section 2 be amended as follows. Section 2.41, A, add before subsection 1 the following, 2.4101. In this section, affordable rental unit means a rental unit for which the rent is fixed at an amount equal to or less than 30% of the tenant's gross household income. B, in subsection 3, in the English version, strike out "and" after paragraph C. 2, and after paragraph C, the following. C1, the applicant certifies that upon completion of construction, a percentage of the rental units in the multi-unit rental residential building that is not less than the minimum percentage established by the Minister of Service New Brunswick will be designated as affordable rental units. And are there any questions or comments on the amendment? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the proposed amendment to the member opposite. The underlying, this bill is the Assessment Act. And although what you have provided here is worthy of consideration, it does not belong in the Assessment Act. But I'm happy to carry this forward for a discussion with the Social Development Minister as we're looking at other changes related to the housing spectrum going forward to consider something like this.
Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the amendment? All those in favor, please say yea. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the amendment defeated. All right. Any other questions? All right. Member from Bathurst, West Beresford. Sorry.
I know, I never get mentioned. It happens. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had quite a bit of discussion over 2 days on this and on this bill. I just have some general questions on housing and on the bill. We'll maybe start off a little bit higher up on this, the housing spectrum, I guess is what we're called. The minister the other day mentioned there was, like, and the previous minister also, there's a pile of departments discussing it. There's now a position of the minister that's been created for housing. And we're being brought a bill. I'm just wondering, is there going to be a plan, a general plan for that spectrum that's going to be brought to the ledge? And is there any anticipated timeline for, I hate to bring up timeline because we've had these discussions on other portfolios, but I have to ask if there's a timeline on this plan.
Through the chair to the member opposite, yes, there will be a plan, an overall strategy, and then some tactics we will take to meet the strategy. Now, we're currently taking the information that was put together for the 90-day rental review, using that and expanding upon that, the full spectrum, because that had a few pieces missing in it. So we're looking at the full spectrum. We're analyzing all the programs that currently exist that contribute to more housing opportunities for New Brunswickers, and then looking at the gaps that are within the current landscape that we have. That is ongoing right now. There's a housing summit being planned for the new year where the gaps will be discussed and the programs that are there and what their shortfalls are, with the intent to have a full housing strategy to be presented within the first half of the new year.
Thank you. Through the chair, I imagine that much of that work, that background work, that research had been done since the beginning of last year. We're not restarting a new process, that is just continuation with maybe a lens on starting to put things down on strategy, just to make sure that we're not change a minister, let's start at square one and keep building. I just want a confirmation on that.
Chair, the member opposite, no, we are not starting from scratch. We are using what's already been developed and building upon that. There's lots of good work that's been done in the past, and now we have the opportunity to pull that all together for an overlying strategy on how to move forward over the next several years to increase our housing opportunities for New Brunswickers.
Okay. Thank you, through the chair. First 6 months of the year, right now, we could kind of tell the discussion without having a plan. It's a bit of tactic here, bits and pieces, and our natural disposition is to say, well, how does that fit in a larger scheme? We've got all kinds of issues. We keep being thrown. There's going to be a lot of stuff brought up. There's going to be a lot of, without having that plan, it's very hard for us to see if whatever bill or tactic is brought up is going to be effective. Because what we're hearing and what we've heard in the last day or so of discussion is this is a piece of the puzzle, but we don't know what the puzzle looks like, so it's hard for us to say it's going to be effective or not without knowing. Because I feel like, and my colleagues do too, this is a very complicated program. It's not going to be a Big Bang Theory where one bill or one tactic or one project is going to solve everything. It's going to be a win by 1,000 cuts, if I can change that saying a little bit. But we need to have a little bit of that plan. So I guess my question is, we're looking at the first 6 months of the new year. Is there any other plans to bring any other bills or partial bills before we get that plan?
So through the chair to the member opposite, that was a good follow-on question to are we starting from scratch? Because the answer is no, we're not starting from scratch. There has been a lot of work done, before a housing minister or minister responsible for housing was put in place. So there is continual improvement ongoing. Since the ministry has been created, it's been all hands on deck, and senior leaders from all across the government are all together working on helping solve this problem. So will there be other bills that you may see come forward before the strategy is presented? It's possible, because that work is continuing ongoing. There's other improvements being considered that aren't requiring legislative changes, and you'll be hearing about those as well. I like a plan. I'm a planner, and I like a plan, so we will be pushing to have this plan done as soon as we possibly can. And, you start with a high-level strategy, and some of the pieces will get filled in as we go along, and I will share what we have developed along the way. I'm not going to wait until you have a perfect plan to present it. We'll talk about this as we're going along and as we're learning more things and as we're contemplating other changes to encourage more development and looking at affordability for New Brunswickers for housing.
Through the chair, thank you, Minister. Well, there's more bills brought up. We can anticipate another full day of questions on something that's on the side of the bills, because we're trying to get a picture of what's going on. I guess one of the issues that is important for a plan, we have a housing minister, but it's not exactly a department. It's a little bit of everything. I know we're going to go back to the one GNB, and essentially there's no problem with that, except that there has to be accountability somewhere. Somebody has to be measured. Somebody has to be, I won't say brought to task, but at least questioned and seeing if we're getting the desired results. And for example, like on this bill, earlier in the question period, we asked is there any targets? How are we going to know if this is going to work? And I believe the answer was, well, as long as there's more housing. We're just so desperate for housing, as long as there's more housing, which is a laudable objective, but I mean, that's just too general for anybody, any government and opposition to be able to put your finger on and say, this is working or this isn't working. Are we putting the funds at the right area? Are we actually generating the incentives that we wanted? So I wonder, it's not there now because it's just more units is what we're looking for as a target. But when the plan comes in, are we going to be looking at specifically on this bill? Will we be seeing some hard targets on what we see as potentially getting accomplished with this incentive?
Through the chair to the member opposite, so I did say we had a target for this. It was the 2021 development year because it was a record year for us. So that would be success for this. But we will have targets for all parts of the spectrum that we can assess ourselves against when we present the plan. We've also said overlying our vacancy rate is at 1.7% right now. We'll hope that the CMHC, when they come back out, says we've improved somewhat. But we need to get to a comfortable 3 to 4% to have enough available units, to have options for New Brunswickers to find affordable units for themselves.
Thank you. Through the chair, well, see, that's a great thing about having targets and having a number to discuss because, you know, when we look at 2021, it was a record year, but I would argue that's when we started discussing a housing crisis. So in the midst of a record year, we really started saying we got a problem here. So that's where we can kind of have some real analysis and saying, is what we're doing actually accomplishing what we're trying to get done? And understandably, we could double probably that number this year, and if immigration continues to go the way it is, it's going to cause all kinds of issues. So that's why having proper objectives is certainly key. I know you previously answered this, and I apologize if I'm repeating the question, but this incentive, there was a budgeted amount that we felt how much it was going to cost the government for this amount. Can I have that, please?
Chair to the member opposite, $5 million per year.
Thank you. And that $5 million is based on the full assessed value of the properties that would be built, or is it assessed at a certain portion of them would be taxed on the 33%, certain portion on 66? Is that a mix, or is just 100%? That's the value of the projects.
Through the chair to the member opposite, it is an estimate of phased-in value. We based it on the 2021 build year, so that was the record year. Also with the understanding that some units take a year to build, some take 2, some take 3, so it's kind of a rolling estimate. So it'd be an average of $5 million a year, based on all those considerations.
Through the chair, so those estimates, are they based on rolling averages of so many years, or are they based on a specific year as a benchmark? How do you come up with those averages?
The chair to the member opposite, we did base it on 2021, as I'd said, so that was 135 units. They had a total assessed value of a little over $250 million, and then chose an average tax rate based on that, and then had it rolling over a number of years with the average amount being $5 million.
So the benchmark is really 2021. So if that year, for example, had more units than usual that were going to take 3-4 years to build, as opposed to same year builds, or it is going to be the base that we were looking at for future years on this $5 million. And again, this was a record year for forever, or just recently?
It's a record year that we know of. And hopefully, it won't be the record going forward.
Okay, that we know of is good. That's good timeline. That's a good timeline. You've probably got a really good memory. In the bill itself, it says the base year means that year determined by the director under subsection 5. And under subsection 5, it says the director shall determine the base year for a multi-unit residential building. Can the minister clarify how that determination is done by the director? And again, I think the director is, what's the title of the director? I'm just sorry if you could just clear that up for me. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Assessment services.
Through the chair to the member opposite, she is the executive director of the Assessment Property Services, Property Assessment Services, thank you. Okay, what was the second part of your question?
You have to sit so I can get up. It just says that in 1531.5, the director shall determine the base year for a multi-unit residential building. I just want to know how is that determined? Is there criteria?
Member opposite, thank you for repeating that. The base year is the year the building permit is issued.
So if that permit is issued at the very tail end of the year and there's very little done on the property, that would mean the first year of incentive at 33% would be done on a very minimal amount. Is that how I understand the bill to be written?
Chair to the member opposite, you are correct.
I've got I've got a few friends that are developers, and these guys they're pretty wise to, they need to find some margins. Is there any concern from the director and the minister that there's going to be, I don't know, use the word, a rush or a real push to get those projects approved at a very early point in the year so that people can, developers can get the maximum amount of that first incentive. And then at a certain point of the year, it's just going to die off because nobody's interested. It's going to create a real seasonality on this. May not be huge, but as far as incentive goes, any concern that that could be a problem?
Through the chair to the member opposite, I mean, there is a seasonality to construction in New Brunswick. So there is a seasonality to it. The intention of this proposed amendment is to get as much construction going as fast as we possibly can. So I hope they pull a ton of building permits right now or maybe in the new year and get going on the building. So, you know, the purpose of this is to make this happen as fast as possible.
Through the chair, to the minister, thank you. I agree. I must say, though, things have changed, technology has changed, and that construction season seems to be expanding and expanding and going, which is good. And I've gotten it through temporary workers, where you used to be able to hire some temporary workers in construction for 4 or 5 months, but now it's lasting 9-10 months for construction season, so there's a risk for projects to be delayed, and that's a side issue. But I just wanted to bring up the point that there is less seasonality as far as construction goes. And I agree, we need to get some construction, no matter what it is, whether it's affordable, we need to get some supply out there. That's why, Mr. Chair, I will bring an amendment to make this a true incentive to all construction workers. So the amendment will read to an act respecting the Assessment Act, amend said bill as follows. In section 15.31, in subsection 1, strike out the definition base year and substitute the following. Base year means the year in which the multi-unit residential building is completed. B, strike out section 5. C, strike out section 11. D, strike out section 12 and substitute the following. 15.3112, sections 25, 27, 28, and 37 do not apply to the director's decision to approve or refuse to approve an application.
To the chair, may I request a recess to consider this?
We will take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. It has been moved by the member from Bathurst West, Beresford, that section number 1, subsection 3, be amended as follows. In section 15.31, A, in subsection 1, strike out the definition base year and substitute the following. Base year means the year in which the multi-unit residential building is completed. N.A. de bus. B, strike out subsection 5. C, strike out subsection 11. And D, strike out subsection 12 and substitute the following. 15.31 subsection 12, sections 25, 27, 28, and 37 do not apply to the director's decision to approve or refuse to approve an application. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment before we go to the vote? I'd like to recognize the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the proposed amendment. I do understand the intent behind it. I do have significant concern that we would change the base date, I think that's what we call it, or to when the construction project is completed, because my concern is that could be played with as well. But what is substantial completion? When is the project completed? Also, the cost of this program is based on the 2021 development year with the number of units that were on the books for that year. If we were to change what the base date was, that could have a significant impact on the cost or deferred cost of this program. And this bill also complements other tax reduction measures that have been put in place by this government, including the reduction of the provincial property tax from over 3 years to 2 years, spike protection put in place for apartments. And so there's a number of concerns associated with this amendment that I can't support that. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions or comments on the amendment before we go to the vote? I'd like to recognize the member for Edmundston, Madawaska Centre.
No, that's the other one.
Excuse me.
The other part of the province. Restigouche West.
Restigouche West will be fine.
Jeez, Mr. Chair, it looks like you've taken a holiday or something. Thank you for recognizing me. We want to expedite this bill also, and I think that any initiative that we can bring up to make it a win-win situation for both the tenants and the promoters, or the and the municipalities, so a win-win-win situation. In this case, the completion date for small projects would probably be within a year, so that would be very quickly. And there is a process to approve a complete project. In the Construction Act, there is some measures. This has to be done, electrical, plumbing, and it has to be livable, so in a sense. So there are some mechanisms to determine the completion date. And you talked about regulations that could be evaluated or put up. The director could put up those regulations and in place to make sure that the completion date is understood by the promoters. That could be done in that way. So there's, in my sense, there's no argument on the regulation part, but if the minister sees it differently, we'll go with it, but let's get this done. And I'd like also to make sure that the minister will go ahead and promote this initiative to the promoters across the province and also to the municipalities so that they understand how they can reach out to their contractors or group of contractors to get some units built ASAP. Merci.
Any further questions or dialogue? I'd like to recognize the member from Bathurst West, Beresford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too, along with my colleague, don't quite understand the concern with the completion date. There's you know, people that go inspect, they assign a completion date. It's a process that's well known in banking and all kinds of industries, so I'm not sure where that comes from. But I would address the deferred cost of $5 million. When our colleague from the Green Party, from Emmercook Tantramar, brought her amendment in because she was afraid that people would try to take advantage of it, I think the answer was it doesn't matter. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we blew the budget for $5 million? Because we get more housing, right? Isn't that what the answer that we've been receiving for 2 days? So I'm kind of like a little bit disappointed on that answer that, you know, if we really believe and we really want this to be an incentive, that's all we're saying is let's make it a real incentive. And if we go past the cost overrun for fear of being told that Liberals will be spending all kinds, I get it. But I mean, you have control of the program and you're still measuring. This is based on a record year. If we surpass that record year, I think it's a good investment. I think it's worthwhile. And to the previous answer, I think from my colleague, there's revenues that come from that later on. So if we actually blow that incentive budget, it means that there's tax revenues, significant tax revenues that will be generated for years to come in this province. So I'm kind of like not understanding the concern around the deferred costs, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments on the amendment? Seeing that there are none, we'll call for the vote. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the amendment? All those in favor, please say yea. Yea. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it, and I'll declare the amendment defeated. Are there any further questions on the bill before we I'd like to recognize the member for Restigouche West.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. You got it right. Now, we've talked that this bill will come in effect January 1st, 2022, and we've also learned that there's 45 projects already in the hopper, mainly in the Moncton area for about 675 units. Are the nonprofit organizations admissible for these? And I'm looking at project for senior homes, senior rental, of course, but would that also be applicable to seniors' homes for nonprofit organization?
They are not excluded from this program, so as long as they meet the criteria, yes, they can use the program as well.
Merci. And like my colleague had mentioned, was the option of opening up also to single-family units observed for a year or 2 years to build those and have those exemptions also for residential new construction or renovations? Was it also considered for those units?
Chair, to the member opposite, the focus of this amendment is rental units. There are other considerations for single-family housing that'll be considered as part of the housing strategy, the overall housing strategy. So that's not off the table. That's just not the focus of this amendment.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, and let's start building. Merci. Thank you.
Are there any questions or further questions or comments on the bill? Seeing that there are none, we will go to the vote in just a second. I'm going to invite the staff to step outside. We'd like to thank you for being here and thank you for your efforts. Thank you. Minister, just before we go to the vote, would you have any closing comments that you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to have a very special thank you to the staff that were here with me over the couple of days. They did a great job, and they were very patient with sharing information with a relatively new minister in this portfolio. And I would like to echo the member opposite's comment. Let's get building.
Thank you, Minister. Is it the pleasure of the committee that Bill number 14, an act respecting the Assessment Act, stand as presented and that I report the bill as agreed to? All those in favor, please say yay. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Minister. We'll take a short recess and we'll be back in just a few moments with Bill number 3, an act respecting surgical facilities. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Is it the pleasure of the committee to take into consideration Bill number 3, an act respecting surgical facilities? All those in favor, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. I declare the motion carried. Mr. Minister, do you have any opening comments and introductions?
Oh, thank you very much. Just again to introduce the staff that's with me today. We have Ian Watson, Assistant Deputy Minister, Health System Collaboration. Behind him is Neil McKay, Director, Policy and Legislation, and directly behind myself, David Giris, Senior Policy Advisor.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to recognize the member for Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the Minister and his staff. So just picking up from where we left off when we ran up against the clock last time, the Minister was explaining that with these proposed surgery centres that there would be two flows of money. There would be money flowing to pay the physicians working in the surgery centres through Medicare, and the other flow of money would be via a contract between the Regional Health Authority and the surgery centre for all the other costs associated with operating the surgery centres, dealing with costs of building or owning the building, I suppose, paying dividends to shareholders and so on, if they exist. My question around that is there anything in this bill that would prevent a surgery centre from simply entering into a single contract with the RHA and pay the physicians at the surgery centre on payroll? In other words, put them on payroll rather than having them charge to Medicare directly.
No, thanks. Through you, Chair, to the member opposite, and again, just trying to get the exact and accurate information out, because right now, RHAs have some physicians on salary. So it's not uncommon to have physicians working for RHAs on salaries. And again, that comes out of their budget. The fee-for-service doctors, which comes out of Medicare, is a separate budget line. So there's really no incentive for the RHAs to hire a doctor in this particular setup, because those clinics that are set up, again, the fee-for-service doctors, as we have them now, many people go visit their doctor puts a claim into Medicare and gets reimbursed. So that is the same situation that is set up right now, for this particular bill that we're talking about, Bill 3, where a code is sent in, or a item is sent into Medicare, and it's all coded and recorded and paid based on a master contract, because the medical society negotiates with the physicians, and they come up with the whole list of what services are and what people are paid for. So I guess the quick answer is in this particular arrangement, no, there's not a clause in there to set up a salaried doctor in one of these clinical settings that we're talking about here in Bill 3. So I think if I understand the question fully, that would be the reply.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not quite clear there on the answer. So the question was, is there anything, let's make a scenario here. So the big corporate group that has for-profit clinics in Canada is based, and the States is based out of Montreal, Vision Group Canada. Vision Group Canada, they have a clinic here, a private clinic here, LASIK MD, a subsidiary. Is there anything in the bill that would prevent a company like LASIK MD from entering into a single contract with the RHA saying, we have salaried physicians, and so our contract will include those salaried physicians as part of the arrangement, so only one arrangement, because we're employing on our payroll physicians on salary, and there will be no fee-for-service physicians here. It's just one lump sum, covers the whole thing. That's what we want to do. Would the bill permit this?
Thank you very much. And again, just trying to think of scenarios where that might be an advantage to the people of the province of New Brunswick. But if in fact a corporation came in and said we have doctors on salary, I can't. When I look at the fee structure, or I think of the fee structure and how we're doing this particular arrangement, the fee that is being charged is the same fee that the doctor would get, whether they're in this clinical setting or within the walls of the of Vitality. So there'd be no advantage for us to say, oh, let's hire this company, bring them in, because I would expect that the fee and the surrounding services associated with that would end up having to be a higher cost. And that's why any contractor that comes in, it's all negotiated. It's all negotiated, and again, we've hired a consultant to work through how the whole process would work, whether, you know, exactly, because we don't want doctors to just say, hey, I'm going to, you know, buy all this equipment, set up my own office, and then do heart surgery on the corner of St. George and Milner, because again, it all needs to be regulated and it all negotiated and follow up to make sure that the outcomes that are initially set up are there. So I know that's a little bit of a longer explanation, but you know, and again, when we talk about the private enterprises that do businesses with the RHAs, I mean, a lot of the drugs come through various drug companies. McKesson is a provider, and again, the drugs that are supplied, it's all negotiated. It's all, an arrangement between the RHA and a private company. So it's not out of the ordinary to have a private company doing business with the RHAs. And just drilling down into what's going on here, again, the doctor is charging a fee for his services, and my understanding, the fee that is charged at the clinic is similar to the fee that's charged by the doctor if that same procedure was performed in the RHA.
So what I'm gathering from the minister's answers, Mr. Chair, is that actually the bill wouldn't actually prevent a corporate surgical center from having doctors on payroll, and simply as everything's negotiable, everything's negotiated, and negotiating a contract with an RHA with that as part of the package, that they've got salaried doctors, and they will take care of the whole shebang. No need to worry about fee-for-service doctors. That's what it sounds like could be possible. And if that's the case, over time, it raises questions about the ability to ensure that there's someone on call for those patients, that there's someone to do in hospital care in the way of post-op if necessary, to deal with complications, because it's a very different situation in that sense around these issues if you are operating with physicians who are simply on a payroll or under some contractual arrangement with a company like LASIK MD or the parent company Vision Group Canada, than fee-for-service doctors. So that's a concern, Mr. Chair here. We've been very clear that we can see advantages for certain procedures of having community-based surgical centers as long as they're publicly owned. So with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the following amendment to the propose the following amendment to the bill, which deals with Section 1, entitled Regional Health Authorities Act, under the definition section C, so 1, subsection 1, C, which says by adding the following definitions alphabetical order, and concerning the definition of surgical services, so the second definition in alphabetical order here, to simply remove a short section of it. So it would read in this amendment, by adding the following definitions of alphabetical order, surgical services mean surgical and diagnostic services that are provided in a surgical facility by a regional health authority. So I would move to amend the bill as follows. In Section 1, subsection 1, paragraph C, in the definition surgical services, strike out a person other than a regional health authority under an agreement with, and just strike it out. And that would address our concern about ensuring that that the surgical centers, community-based surgical centers, remain publicly owned.
It has been moved by the member from Fredericton South and leader of his party that section number 1, subsection 1, paragraph C, be amended as follows. In the definition of surgical services, strike out a person other than a regional health authority under an agreement with. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment before we go to the vote? Minister?
Mr. Speaker, could we just a 3-minute recess just to review it, and then we can come back with some comments?
Certainly, certainly. We'll take a 3-minute recess. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment, Minister of Health?
And again, just to sort of expand on this philosophical difference, I think that's occurring here today in the debate, where part of the whole idea of using the leverage of some of the doctors, like this particular clinic that we're talking about up in Bathurst, is, you know, again, that here's a local doctor with a local solution to a problem that was, causing a huge wait line in the, for cataracts. So in having Dr. Giovanni come forward with a pilot project that's 2 years that, again, will allow us to see if there's any unintentional consequences, I think is a small step. And the reason, but when I read this amendment, would be that the RHA would own that clinic. Well, again, it just goes back to that concept that doctors have been owning space or renting space and performing procedures that have been expanding over the years of what you can do in the doctor's office, and those procedures are charged back to Medicare. So for the RHAs to purchase or rent or put a doctor on a salary and run those clinics, again, it's just counterintuitive to what we're trying to do here, which is expand the services in a way that's more efficient or effective, and just embracing technology, which has changed over the years and allowed some of the procedures that used to take general anesthetic and days in the hospital can now be done without any anesthetic at all with a 15-minute procedure. So it's moving forward, and I know that the checks and balances or the concerns that the member across the way maybe not found specifically in this bill, but part of that, again, the negotiation of any other physician or company or entity that wants to come forward and say, we have a proposal, it would be part of that whole, what are the needs of the RHA? What are the needs of the people in the province of New Brunswick? And is this an effective in cost and also in all the other aspects that go with having procedures done outside the hospital structure in a clinic setting, And so this is the ultimate goal. And taking the amendment as put on the floor right now would just totally go against what we're trying to accomplish here with Bill number 3.
Any further questions or comments on the bill? On the amendment, excuse me, the amendment. I'd like to recognize the member from Moncton Centre and leader of his party.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the minister could point us to the legislation, I guess with respect to the concern that's been raised by the leader of the Green Party. I've shared some concerns in the past as well around having, whether it be, international types of medical corporations setting up surgical facilities here. Could the minister point to the legislation that we have today, whether existing or with the amendments that are being proposed, that indicates that it will be a physician that is a fee-for-service set up versus a salaried physician? Could he point to us where the legislation prohibits, I guess, the setup of a facility owned by some other party that has salaried employees, I guess that type of thing? Could he just point to what is in place now or what is being proposed on how it would address those concerns?
Okay, thank you very much, and just trying to be very succinct with the answer. These arrangements are made by the RHAs. These arrangements that we particularly have on the plate here today. So the Medical Payment Act, which goes hand in hand with the RHA Act, is again, I think, what the member opposite needs to look at the broader scope and how they work together. Because an RHA would never, or at least it wouldn't be to their advantage in any way, to enter into an agreement where they say, well, we will pay the doctor in that clinic to do these procedures, because that doctor can use the Medical Payment Act, and if you opt out, you're out. You know, the Medical Payment Act is how the doctors get paid, and this is the system that goes on now. It goes on. It's gone on in the past, and again, trying to enhance that to reduce the wait times, reduce the number of people on the wait. So again, that's the ultimate goal here, and I think the members, I understand, you know, what their points they're trying to make, but again, specifically to that negotiation between the RHA and the entity or the company or the individual, a doctor wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't be on salary, because the way the doctors get paid in these types of arrangements, and what we're doing here in Bill 3 would be through Medicare or the Medical Payment Act. And again, I mean, the RHAs deal with multinational corporations all the time. So I think, you know, the members opposite have to kind of make that distinction as to what are they standing for here, or what are they standing against. And you know, there's companies, I mentioned McKesson, Johnson & Johnson, J&J supplies Band-Aids, and you know, I mean, you could go through a list of multinational companies, some, I would assume most with shareholders, enter into agreements with the RHAs. So this is a very similar arrangement in the fact, but it's the same but different, where the same kind of arrangements with fee-for-service doctors providing service to the public get paid through Medicare and through the Medical Payments Act. So I think members opposite may be mixing a bit of the acts together, but they have to be looked at hand in hand. All we're doing here today, again, is allowing for services that were performed in the hospital to be performed in a surgical or in a clinical setting, but basically with that same payment arrangement that was done previously. The outcome, again, of reducing the wait time, reducing the time on the wait list, plus the fact that within the hospital now you've freed up 2 days that used to be taken up for cataract surgeries. Those 2 days will allow other operations such as hip, such as knee, such as some of the cancer operations that need to get done. That freeing up of space will again reduce those other wait times. And again, this is where healthcare needs to be examined and pushed, and needs to be look at various options and opportunities, again, to provide the healthcare service to the people. And we made the commitment that this will be done through Medicare, through a one-payer, a one-tier philosophy, that the individuals, the New Brunswickers, will be paying, but with their Medicare card, not their credit card. And again, trying to alleviate the fears that the members opposite are putting forward. That's what we're doing here, because we know that the system is taxed. It's whether it comes from the HR. I mean, there's positions that go unfilled, that again, the money's there, the opportunity's there. It's the people to fill those, and that's where we've gone ahead with recruiting. We've gone ahead with creating extra seats for RNs, not just here in the province of New Brunswick, but we've also, Beale University has had an agreement to allow New Brunswickers to take their courses, which are out of Maine, and that's an interesting discussion. But and again, all of that trying to alleviate some of the stresses and stressors that we all see within the healthcare system that have been pointed out by the members across the way and other members as well. And it's not lost on us. It's not lost on this side of the government, and that's why we're taking steps. And we're not done yet. There'll be more announcements and more things to be done, but particularly on Bill 3. This is a pilot project with a specific doctor in a specific clinic that is, again, negotiated with the RHA, and that pilot project will be monitored, and we'll see what the outcomes are and make sure there's no unintentional consequences that we are not aware of, and again, providing that service and high care for the people of New Brunswick that I don't think too many people should be able or could be able to argue. When they've been in the clinic, they've seen the work that's done, the investment that's been made. I would think that people would only say that it's reasonable and needed in the community is what I hear when I was up there.
So yeah, just to be, I guess, more specific, is there anything in the legislation as it stands now that prohibits a company from setting up and having salaried surgeons, whatever the case may be, and being able to enter into an agreement with the RHA and collect payments for services, but through a corporation that would have salaried surgeon? Is there anything in the legislation that prohibits that from taking place?
Chair, through you, same answer as before, no. And then we explained the reasons why that negotiation between the RHA and a particular doctor, the doctor would charge through Medicare. So if there's a scenario the members across the way are particularly thinking about or looking for, they could articulate that, and we'd have that on the table. But basically, again, that answer remains the same as last time.
So is it the case then that absolutely a Medicare number would be required, a billing number, to charge for services under this type of agreement?
Thank you very much. And again, the way this project, this pilot project was set up is that the doctor would be paid through Medicare, and to be paid through Medicare, you would need a billing number. They go hand in hand.
But again, then that means that it would be left open-ended where someone could enter into an agreement and have some type of other form of payment agreement without contravening the legislation. Is that possible?
And again, from a litigious nature, again, the answer is no, but the reality would be when you look at the acts together and how the RHA Act and the Medical Payment Act and all those acts go together, I don't foresee any way that particular scenario, as mentioned by the opposition, would come about.
So I guess if you could help me better understand then, if there's nothing prohibiting that type of scenario, then what is the purpose of the amendments that are being brought forward? And I looked through it here, and it's not a lengthy bill by any means. There's the amendment to the definition of surgical services and hospital services under the Regional Health Authorities Act, and for which is subject to the amendment that was brought forward, where surgical services means a surgical and diagnostics services that are provided in a surgical facility by a person other than a regional health authority under an agreement with regional health authority. So that's one of the major changes that's being proposed. A bunch of other amendments seem to be housekeeping. I guess when I see that there are, amendments being made to the French language version and nothing to the English language version, to me that means that it's a housekeeping type of amendment for interpretation purposes. And then under the Medical Services Payment Act, and then again there's another definition being amended for the private facility. That means a private clinic or hospital facility established, operated or maintained by a person other than a regional health authority as defined in the Regional Health Authorities Act, but does not include a surgical facility providing surgical services as defined in the Act. And then it closes out there with a number of amendments, and I think some of them, it strikes out subsection 2.02 sub 2 because it doesn't exist anymore, so it's more housekeeping there. And then it changes some of the wording from private hospital facility to the new definition of private facility. So those are two major definitions here that I'm seeing in the legislation that is being proposed. I guess in taking into account, what our line of questioning is here on how services can be charged back to the RHAs, what is the purpose? Can you kind of tie it together for me, the purpose of those amendments in moving forward with this Bathurst pilot project? Why are those specific amendments necessary for this operation to get off the ground?
Oh, very, very good question, and I don't mind doing that at all. And maybe let's just do it before and after. Before we brought in Bill 3, when Dr. Giovanni did cataract surgery in the hospital, that was the only place that he could do it or get paid to do it. After Bill 3, he can now get paid for the same service in the clinic setting, which is outside the hospital. And that's the long and the short of it. That's the major thing, is that the amendment defines the surgical services and allows for surgeries, and it goes to diagnostic testing because you have to do the testing beforehand, to be done outside a hospital, to be paid for by the Regional Health Authority as long as it is under an agreement with the Regional Health Authority. And then as you back up, it talks about the amendments provide a clear definition of hospital services and removes any ambiguity, and I have trouble with the words today. Ambiguity. It's been a long day. Ah oui. En français, qu'est-ce que c'est le mot en français pour ambiguity? I probably did better that way than the other. Anyways, je m'excuse. It's a little levity at the end of the day. But that's the before and after. Before, that could only be done inside the hospital. That service, that cataract surgery could only be done inside the hospital, and Dr. Giovanni would get paid. Now, he is in a clinic setting outside the four walls, or the bricks and mortar of the hospital, and he's now able to provide that service or do that procedure and be paid through Medicare.
And so I guess my understanding is that this Bill 3 is really, it's designed for that specific purpose, the Bathurst cataract pilot project, and no other project that I know that we've spoken about, I guess, in media interviews. There's different proposals that are on the table. Would further amendments to the legislation be required for other projects that come forward?
Thank you very much. And good question, because we didn't specifically name the individual or the particular clinic in the legislation, because being a pilot project, if it, and again, for whatever reason, it might not work out, because again, there was a lot of discussion and negotiations beforehand. But then you'd have to come back to the House to remove those names. And same thing with adding. If you were to add another clinic, let's say Horizon wants to enter into an agreement with a physician to provide some type of a service. Again, that would all be negotiated, but there would be no need necessarily to come back to the legislature in order to add those additional services. And that's, again, sort of some of the checks and balances, I guess, in going ahead with one particular clinic and having it as a pilot project. And I think I mentioned the last day, too, is that we have hired a consultant to look at how that would all be processed from, again, we don't want physicians just going out and investing all this money but not being able to have an agreement with an RHA. You know, again, to the point we were trying to make earlier about a physician being paid through Medicare and needing a billing number and whatnot. There are private clinics that perform cosmetic surgeries that aren't covered under Medicare, and that's a whole different situation. But this one is specifically to an insured service, and that's where again there is some comfort in going forward with this, as it is limited at this point in time. So there'd be no need for legislative changes if we added or subtracted.
And so for this specific case here, so like if we're talking about amending here the amendment that's before us that would make the surgical facility that would, I guess, the ownership would be still with the regional health authority. So I'm wondering what kind of amendment, what kind of impact the amendment might have on the pilot project moving forward, as it's setting up shop. There's obviously startup costs that I don't know if the individual surgeon is taken on personally, or if there's been grants, or we talked about the 41 million in surgical backlogs from the federal government. Are there monies being provided to this surgeon to set up a shop, or are all those costs coming out of their own their own professional corporation that I imagine they have set up?
Thanks again, Mr. Chair, through you. Just a couple of different questions in that discussion. And again, going back to the decision for the Ekity Bathurst Ophthalmology Clinic to move forward. Again, that was the particular doctor making those decisions to make that investments. And so again, for the RHA to go out and buy an individual piece of land or a building or whatever, just doesn't economically make sense. There's enough capital requirements within the bricks and mortars of a hospital, and actually we're having our capital budget in the not too distant future, which we'll be able to talk about a number of the investments that the RHAs are making and the various locations. And I know that will, when we do the estimates on that capital investment, I know that it'll be an interesting discussion. I know it has been in the past about where the investments are made, how they're made. But again, this goes back to the services provided. And I know that's the key element here, is that having this particular clinic and the capital investment made by that particular individual allows the RHA to do more. And when I say the RHA to do more, again, they've got enough of a list of capital projects and equipment that's needed to be purchased within the walls. This allows them to leverage the ability of the doctors to do this work, and leverages the abilities to move forward faster than the present rate at which they're going, even with significant investments in the services. Again, we can look at the numbers, but I don't think that would, make any, advancement on what's but there's a significant amount of investment being done here in the province of New Brunswick that's increased over the number of years. We're going to be talking capital in the next couple of weeks, but for this particular one, here's an opportunity where the individual doctor makes the investment, or whether it's through his private corporation, but again, it's a solution that's come forward that we need to take that opportunity to look at, and that's why we're moving forward with Bill 3.
So I guess my question is, with respect to this, if we're going to move away from the definition here that is being proposed, the amendment taken away, that it be an agreement with a person other than a regional health authority, and that the service be directly provided by the regional health authority, I guess that would assume that the regional health authority would be responsible for setting up the clinic and financing the clinic. So I'm wondering, in this case, then we're looking at having individual doctors come forward with projects, but I imagine they're taking on the cost themselves of setting up these clinics. Is the government providing any financing to the doctor, in this case, to set up that clinic? Or is it completely at his own expense?
No, there was no capital given to the doctor to set up the clinic from health department or RHA.
So coming back to the purpose of this pilot, and the purpose was to reduce the wait times significantly, reduce the wait list, and we're told that will happen, and it will be a significant improvement. But could you explain, I guess, the reasoning why this type of project is going to achieve that goal, as opposed to having it done in-house in the hospital? Is it a space issue? Is there a lack of space to perform these services? Is it a staffing issue? So could you explain how this cannot be achieved in-house versus why going out to a clinic, a private clinic in this case, will achieve the goal of reducing the wait time significantly?
Absolutely, great question. And it's basically simple math, Mr. Chair, through you. It's the ability to increase the number of cataract surgeries per week is increased dramatically. And I know it's interesting because the stats are such that the wait time the projection was between 12, 18 months, will be reduced down to 6 to 9 months. And it's interesting because more people go on the wait list all the time. So we would want to see some type of a drop in that wait list. But I know the numbers on a weekly basis, I think, increased from, they basically double. Now we have an aging population, and as people age, their eyesight is affected. So there's different measures that you need to put on, not just the number of people on the wait list, but how long they've been on the wait list. And it would be, one of the goals would be good to see that our average time on the wait list would be closer to that national average. And again, so not just the full number, but also the time on the list. And that list, I know, keeps changing, but there's already been some headway made, even in the very short period of time that the doctor's been up and running. So again, the simple math, when I look at it, there were 2 days in the clinic or in the hospital setting, and the number of hours that were available, or the length of time it took to do a cataract operation in the hospital because of the various methodologies that are used there, versus the number of hours it takes to do it in the clinical setting. It basically doubles the number of operations you can do in the same period of time.
I don't have any further questions on the amendment.
At this time, are there any further questions or comments on the amendment? I'd like to recognize the member for Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out that so far in this discussion, I haven't heard any member of the Economic Policy Committee argue against the idea of enabling the creation of community-based surgical centers for those procedures that can be performed outside of hospitals. It seems to me, and we haven't heard from the Progressive Conservative members of the committee, but I assume they're of the same mind. So no one has so far disputed the value of enabling the creation of surgical centers outside of the hospitals. No one. What my amendment simply does is ensure that they remain publicly owned, that they're publicly owned. All of the benefits that the minister has been talking about for establishing the ability for surgical centers for certain procedures to be set up outside of hospitals are maintained under public ownership. Nothing is different, except it's publicly owned. It ensures there's no profit motive injected into the surgical center, and ensures the best interests of the patients are looked after. That's the only difference. With this amendment, community-based surgical centers could be set up around the province. They could deal with cataracts. They could deal with other surgeries that make sense to do outside of the hospital. We'd reduce the pressure, still reduce the pressure on the surgeries in our hospitals, free up surgical space and time, operating theater space and time. All the benefits the minister has been talking about would be kept whole, remain intact with this amendment, with the added benefit that the ownership of the community-based surgical centers would be public rather than corporate. It's the only difference. So that's why this is an important amendment. The minister keeps talking about the project in Bathurst, but this bill is not written specifically to accommodate only that. This bill is a framework for a new way of delivering certain surgical procedures outside of our hospitals. Great. There's benefits, many benefits to be received as a result, but the benefits will be counterbalanced if these are not publicly owned, based on experience across Canada in comparison of corporate-owned community surgical centers and publicly owned surgical centers outside of the hospitals that are clearly important to understand, and would detract from the benefits of setting this more decentralized approach up outside of hospitals for certain surgical procedures. But they must remain publicly owned to really maximize the benefits to New Brunswickers, and that's the purpose of the amendment, Mr. Chair, and I hope that members will support it. Thank you.
Thanks. And I appreciate the argument from the member across the floor. And when you look at the RHAs now, I mean, there are a significant number of things being done within the confines of the hospital in order to alleviate the pressures in the community to get wait lines down, wait times on the wait lines down. But it hasn't been enough. It hasn't been enough. And if we wait or force the RHAs to be the only ones that can go out into the community and set up, it's still not going to be enough. So they're optimizing the resources that they have in their present budget within the walls of the, and I mean, I'm talking about some of the community centers down here and some of the, you know, there's a lot of community health centers that are owned and operated by the RHAs. But this is leveraging up, and again, because of the demand is so great, and because of the stress on the capital, stress on the HR capital within the RHAs, this allows, again, us to provide as good, if not better, a service to the individuals who have been on that wait list for more than a year, some of them more than a year. And the statistics that I have from September 30th to November 18th is that it has dropped the number of people waiting more than a year from 578 down to 517 people who have waited more than a year. So we're reducing that time on the number of people that have been on that wait list. Now again, more people are coming on, so that's not as fair a measure as how long have you been on that wait list. And we're able to do that because we're leveraging the investment made by the Acadian Bathurst Ophthalmology Clinic. And that's why this particular amendment doesn't accomplish that, because now we're back to waiting for the RHA to go out and make those investments when their capital is already stretched and their HR capital is already stretched as well.
Any further questions or comments on the amendment? Okay, we're going to go for the vote. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the amendment? All those in favor, please say yay. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I'll declare the amendment defeated. At this time, we'll return to the bill itself. Are there any further questions there on the bill before we? I'd like to recognize the member for Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another thing this bill does in Section 4 is make some changes to Schedule 2 of a regulation or the Medical Services Payment Act, and that's Regulation 8420. So Schedule 2 basically lists a whole long line of things that are not deemed to be entitled services in terms of Medicare under the Medical Services Payment Act. And this bill is designed, the way it's written, to amend Schedule 2 to remove radiological services provided in the province by a private radiology clinic from the list that are deemed not to be entitled services under Schedule 2 and enable the services of a private radiology clinic to be funded through the Medical Services Payment Act. So that's interesting. I would make an amendment here with respect to Schedule 2 in Section 4, so an amendment to Section 4, that would essentially also, from the list of services currently not deemed to be entitled services under Schedule 2 to bring in not only P1, which is radiology services provided in the province by a private radiology clinic, but also bring under the Medical Services Payment Act A1, which is abortion. So, Mr. Chair, this would seem to be one of those services that can be readily provided outside of hospital, not to use up operating time, surgery time inside a hospital, but could be carried out effectively in a surgical center. So I would move, with respect to an act respecting surgical facilities, an amendment to the bill as follows for Section 4, to strike out paragraph P1 and substitute paragraphs A1 and P1.
It has been moved by the member from Fredericton South that Section 4 be amended as follows. Strike out paragraph P1 and substitute paragraphs A.1 and P.1. Are there any questions or comments on the amendment before we call for the vote? Minister?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this is, you know, a topic that's been around for a bit, and I know when my predecessor was looking after healthcare, the RHAs were asked about wait times when it came to abortions, and the response was that there wasn't a wait list, nor was there a wait time, like time on the wait list. There are procedures that occur readily and, of course, need to be, versus the cataracts, which had people waiting longer than 12 months. So the RHAs came back and said that there was no wait list, and thus there was not a need to include the clinical services, because the services were being provided within the RHAs, both Vitality and Horizon. So I know the member opposite, he tried to limit the scope of the bill the last time. Now he wants to expand the scope of the bill. But again, this is for a particular situation where there was a long lineup, and there were people that were on the lineup for well over a year, almost 600 people over a year waiting for cataract surgery. So that's where, again, the particular Bill 3 said let's expand the services and to this clinical setting specifically for the cataracts as a pilot project. And the agreement was reached between the RHAs, who gave us the recommendation on the other services, and that's where we are today. So I would suggest, again, for the reasons I've stated, to vote down this particular amendment and continue along with the bill.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? I'd like to recognize the member for Moncton Centre and Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would say that I support this amendment. It's an amendment that has been debated on the floor of the legislature. We had it a couple of years ago. We brought it forward for debate, and unfortunately it did not pass. And we've seen the clinic here in Fredericton that was the target of that amendment, that provided that type of service outside of a hospital setting, had to shut its doors. And they provided a valuable service, not just for abortions, but to serve others in the LGBTQ community. We drive by that every day on our way here from our lodging. And I just can't help but be reminded of that. And I mean, the abortion access is not necessarily a question of, wait lists and how long you're waiting for that service. I think it's a question of access and proximity and having quick and efficient access when you need it. And so it's a question of security for individuals that are living at a distance from an abortion site that offers that service, whether it be Moncton or otherwise. And so when they have to travel long distances, it creates other barriers that is not just a question of time and having access to that facility. And so that's why I question this minister's approach to talking about, the wait list, and, we don't have the same lengthy wait list that we might have for cataracts, and to justify the position. So I think it comes down to, having that access for a vulnerable person. It's, could be, women or girls that are at a young age. They may not, be fully disclosing to their parents. They have to take onto the road, by themselves, staying in a location that they might not know anyone. So there's security issues there as well. And so we debated that. We pushed for this government to repeal that section of this regulation. We continue to be of the position that we should repeal that. We should, and my colleague from Edmonton, Madawaska Centre, questioned the last time, around nurse practitioners. There's other areas where we could extend this same type of privilege to clinics outside of a hospital setting that could alleviate pressures that we're seeing on the healthcare system, whether it be the nurse practitioners in the Edmonton region that are providing services, but they're not having access to the, hospital privileges. And so, this is another case, the abortion access. Why not allow the private clinics like the one that we have in Fredericton, the one that was operating but had to shut down? Why not repeal and allow that procedure to move forward? And so I fully support this amendment that's been brought forward.
Member for Fredericton South.
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to point out the comparison here. I mean, this bill is saying to people who currently use the radiology clinic and paying out of pocket in Moncton, don't worry, when this bill passes, you won't have to pay for that out of pocket anymore. That'll be covered. You'll be covered. But when it comes to abortion services being provided at Clinic 554, this bill is saying unless this amendment were adopted, tough luck. You're going to continue to pay for abortion services out of your pocket at 554. And meanwhile, if you go to Moncton and previously were paying for radiological services at the clinic there, we got you covered. We got you covered. But when it comes to reproductive health, we don't. We're going to force you to continue to travel long distances, if you can, to Moncton or Bathurst to seek an abortion inside the hospital. And while there aren't long waiting lists for abortion services in those hospitals, they take time away from other procedures in the hospital that need to be done in the hospital when these can be done in a clinic setting, and the best practices nationally well recognized as sexual health and reproductive health services are better provided in clinic settings than in hospitals in terms of patient care, in terms of follow-up, in terms of the overall approach to the patients in those cases. Much better arrangements than in the hospitals. And so the same logic applies here to what the minister is talking about with respect to cataracts or other procedures that might happen, be contemplated here, like vasectomies for abortion services. So why keep them inside the hospital when, if you move them outside of the hospital, you're going to free up some space and time for other procedures inside the hospital. So there you go.
I appreciate the comments, but seeing the time at 6 o'clock, wonder if we could adjourn for the evening.
We have reached, actually, past our adjournment time, so I'm going to, I guess, terminate the discussion or the comments at this time. But I would like to take a moment to call for the vote on the amendment, if we could, before we depart.
Speaking.
Okay, well, I appreciate that very much. We're after the closing time, so the meeting will be adjourned for this evening. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.